Now also we find the garden sometimes symbolized as a little fenced-in enclosure, in which, as like as not, you will find two animals, a lion and a unicorn. Now we all remember the good old nursery rhyme, the lion and the unicorn fighting for the crown. You'll find that the lion and the unicorn, for instance, are the supporters of the crest of Great Britain, the British Empire. The unicorn is a very wonderful creature, with one horn in its form, made like a horse. The unicorn is a very, very sensitive and delicate animal, and always likes to be around kindly people. The unicorn will very patiently and lovingly follow the mysterious Virgin of the world, Sophia, who is the only one that can put a bridle on it. This is a very interesting bit of symbolism also, because what is one horn but one pointed? And what is one pointed except will or consciousness itself? Therefore, the unicorn represents the power of will, the conscious will of the individual. The lion, of course, the red lion, we know to be the symbol of the mystery or of the great power of transmutation or corruption. We know that the lion in this case represents wisdom. So will and wisdom captured in a garden can accomplish great and wonderful things. Because the struggle of will and wisdom seeking for the crown, of course the crown is Gatto, the symbol in the Hebrew Kabbalah of the supreme power, of the supreme reality of all things. The crown of power and rulership. There are many uses of alchemical symbolism in other departments of living. We also find, for example, in the alchemical doctrine, constant references to various symbols used in the Bible. We find, for instance, that the complete transmutation and the production of the mysterious universal medicine is believed to be contained within the Canticles of Solomon. In other words, the Song which is Solomon's contains the complete formula for the production of universal medicine. And the alchemist can break it down and show you word for word, line for line, how that follows through the various researchings and various cycles of transmutation. Another very important alchemical formula is said to be concealed in the Lord's Prayer. Now, the alchemists who recognize that that is true were telling two stories at one time. They were telling that they had found that the Lord's Prayer was an exact example of psychic chemistry. But they were also telling you that the end of psychic chemistry was the achievement of the spiritual state represented by the Lord's Prayer. It worked both ways. And that also that the state of holiness or piety, or the state of prayerful contemplation of reality, was the alchemical transmutation. That the transmutation of fear into faith, for example, was the overcoming of the black symbol of vitriol. All these things work out on moral and ethical levels. The only difference between them and our general concept of knowledge lies in the exactitude of the symbol. For example, the alchemist says that the sun in the air, in the sky, that is represented in the earth by gold. Therefore, that the gold and the sun are the same thing exactly in vibratory principle. And that the gold in the earth and the sun in the sky are polarized to the pulse point in the human heart. And therefore, that the human heart, the sun and gold, are all in sympathetic ratio to each other. And that they are of an identical and proper nature, and that they have certain powers in common. Dr. Rudolf Steiner and his researches in Switzerland in connection with the use of the talismanic metals of the ancients in healing disease discovered what we have also learned later by other means, namely that potable gold, or what we might term biological gold, is a heart remedy. And that a syllable gold goes directly into the walls of the heart. Thus, the sympathy that was represented in alchemy was recognized as an existing fact in nature, and that these different principles all work together. Now, the same thing was true with other parts of the universe. everything that was morally true was scientifically true. If it is true, for example, that wisdom is better than ignorance, that can be proved on terms of chemistry. It can be proved in terms of music, in color, in tone, in sound, in everything. That all values that exist ethically also exist scientifically. And that the polarities of all the elements are to be found in the moral and spiritual life of the individual. And that which constitutes a good life also constitutes an exact working formula for a chemical compound. That just as surely as man is able to integrate certain patterns in his own living, the laws governing these patterns are exactly the same as those used in architecture. And a happy, harmonious, well-integrated home can be mathematically diagrammed, and the diagram will be the perfect structure for a building. This is what Leonardo meant by certain of his canons. In other words, there is a dynamic which extends from one level of life to another. Pythagoras knew that if you played a certain chord of music, that this chord, in its mathematical vibration, could be and was equivalent to the basic key to the structure of a building, the basic key to a chemical compound, a basic formula in law, everything. All these things work together constantly. Therefore, if you have a perfect method of purifying a metal, you have a perfect method of purifying a government, a perfect method of purifying the human body and the human soul and the human mind. If you can make certain elements work together, you can make certain philosophies work together, certain sciences meet, certain races mingle. All these things are ruled by the same law. There is one master pattern, which is the great archetype. And all arts and sciences unfold this archetype. And whatever is true of the individual is true of the collective. Whatever the law is working in nature, it must work in man. And just as surely as certain energies in space unite to produce worlds, so certain energies in man must meet and mingle to produce the development and unfoldment of his body and his functions. There is only one set of laws. And these laws become the keys to the Hermetic art. For the Hermetic art is nothing but the reduction of good intentions to a science. These arts tell you that if you have 7 powers of metals in nature, you have 7 organs in the body, you have 7 glandular structures of importance within the body, you have 7 principal orifices in the body, you have 7 principal centers in the brain. All of these are tied together by a sympathy. And as you have certain planets in the sky, so you have certain planets in the soul. And as these planets, by their forms, release certain psychic energies and intensities through man, these 7 energies have in their turn created the arts and sciences, which are nothing but rationalizations by man along the lines of his own energy. Man is able to build a house and to master architecture because he has a principle of architecture in his own soul. That principle of architecture within his own soul is represented by one of the 7 metals. If, therefore, he lacked a certain element within his constitution, he would lack a dimension of consciousness. If gold was removed from his body, he would not only die, but assuming that he did not die, a proportion or dimension of consciousness would depart from him. Every one of these things is tied together, forming one tremendous, all-inclusive pattern. And the pattern itself was described in the Hermetic arts as the tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz. For in this tomb was all of the symbolism of a miniature universe, and in the ceiling of it burned the ever-burning lamp, which was the symbol of consciousness. As therefore the consciousness in nature produces the world, so the consciousness in man sets up septenaries within itself. These septenaries are all on sympathy with each other, exactly like tuning forks, which at the same pitch will react to the sound one or the other. The same way diseases represent certain perversities in vibratory rates. These diseases can be reached by sounding their keynotes. They can be neutralized by other rates of vibration, representing their antitheses. This was the basis of the sympathetic medicine of Paracelsus. We treated the ailments of Mars with the power of Venus and the ailments of Saturn with the power of Jupiter. But when you say Saturn and Jupiter as planets, you're also referring to elements, to minerals, to medications, to degrees of consciousness, to sense perceptions, to soul perceptions, to intuitional faculties, and to the whole gamut. Because all of these things move on the same vibration patterns. Thus we have in alchemy this concept of one universe, in which a series of formulas exist. Now the alchemist took the universal formula, or space, which is the largest, and he reduced it to a formula that he could follow in his laboratory, and we can follow a little bit from Prof. in order that we may understand the symbolism a little better. In his great work on salt, sulfur, and mercury, Von Welling says that he took a tiny grain of the universal medicine and placed it on the surface of water in a small retort, which he diametrically sealed. He then placed this retort on a sand furnace. And a sand furnace is one in which the temperature is maintained at about 8 of the human body, which is very important. It never got too warm. The heat was applied only through sand. There was a thick layer of sand between the heat and the retort resting in the sand. And Von Welling says that after a certain time, when the heat within the bottle reached that temperature of incubation, or the temperature, as he says, that is achieved by the hen sitting on an egg, when that peculiar natural heat level was reached, this grain of the elixir, or the mysterious powder, began to move. And he said as he watched it, it began to spin. And as it spun, it threw parts of itself off. And these parts that flew off began to move around it. And in a half an hour, he saw unfold within the retort a complete solar system. Why? Because every unit must follow the law of the entire. Now, if he had used a different level of analogy, he could have taken that same grain, placed it within another type of bottle, with another group of elements to work with, and under the same heat and length of time, this grain of the eternal elixir would have begun to move in a different direction, would gradually have taken the whirling proportions of the human embryo and would have ultimately developed into a human body called the homunculus. He would have done exactly the same thing. And he would have had the tiny human being in the body. Now we also have, in the Paracelsian theory, the possibility of reviving all kinds of forms from their own ashes. This we have under various symbolisms. A plant burned to ashes within a sealed bottle, and then under a certain type of pressure and under certain use of alchemical formulas, heated to a certain degree. The plant, or a shadow of it, will grow again in the bottle, in ashes. Years ago, I had an interesting experience with which we will try to explain this. A man came to me who had spent many years up in the northern part of Canada, along the Klondike. He was an old gold miner. And he said, there is something that I've never been able to understand, namely that gold grows. He said, we could work out a vein, leave it for 10 years, and come back to it, and there was more gold there. He said, we were convinced that this gold accumulated in some way, drawn by whatever amount of gold was still left in the vein, the little part that we didn't get. The seeds were still there, and this gold grew. And he said, as a proof of that, he said, I took a piece of ore with a small amount of gold still in it, and I placed that gold in an hermetically sealed jar, small jar. It was just a little bottle about this size, about 2 inches in diameter. He said, I have now unsealed this, and I want to show it to you.